finish, could you tell me why you left your most recent position at Demantech?
I was laid off. That happened last month. My job mostly involved doing special projects. I was not part of the transaction process, so to speak. So what happened was my special projects, so for me to do special projects, they had to invest in the company. So the investment got reduced, and the budget got cut, and they got cut last year, and this year they got really cut because the company is facing flat revenues projection for next year, and they are also projecting zero profits for next year. So they're making some changes, and the analysts are really getting on their case for doing that, and so therefore they had to make some changes, and that's why my job was let go.
Okay, all right. So at Demantech, what would you say was your greatest achievement?
There are several achievements actually. So let me tell you about the first thing that I did. The commission systems was in shambles. The salespeople were not getting their commission at the right time. They were not getting accurate commissions. So that was the first reason. That was the reason why I was actually in the Demantech. That's why I was hired as a consultant, as a temp person. So once I was hired, not only did I try to streamline the process, I tried to create a new tool for commissions. Now this commissions, when I tried to create this one, my boss told me, well, your idea is noble, but I don't think it can be done. But I went ahead and created that tool, and they used it for 3 years, that tool that I created. And after that, the company was going IPO, and because they were going IPO, they had to have a certain system which was SOX compliant. And the implementation was going on, and I was only responsible for one section of that system implementation. But the person who was in charge of accounting, she quit, and 2 other people quit at the same time. And the project got delayed. It got delayed by 4 months. And then my boss decided to put me as a project manager at that time and said, well, come up with a recovery plan. We need to come and finish this by this deadline. And that deadline was not negotiable because we had an IPO, so we had to finish it. And so I came up with a recovery plan. And the outside consultant who was engaged with that said he never thought it would be done. Once I finished it, he said, well, Wish, what you did was a mini miracle. And I was able to finish it within that time. And after that, I was in charge of implementing SOX. Now, implementation of SOX, it took cross-functional teams, it took leading cross-functional teams, and it took me influencing cross-functional teams. And we did that 4 months ahead of schedule, and with 80 controls. An average of for our company size, average number of controls are 150. We did that in 80 controls, 4 months ahead of time. And I had a $1.2 million budget. I came within $5,000 of it.
Great. Wonderful achievements. So tell me about a mistake that you made and how you handled it.
Well, what happened was initially when I was trying to come up with solutions, I was the guy who came up with solutions for new way of doing certain things. So I started talking to different vendors about certain tool that we had to bring in to create invoices for us. That was the problem. The problem was our invoices were not getting out to the customers in time. Everything was being done manually, and we had to go find something. And that was the problem. So I went ahead and went to a vendor. I negotiated with them, and then we started progressing. We had a contract, and we started progressing on that one. And then as we got into it, I realized that this was not the right person. Our money was being wasted. I didn't think that was a good idea. And at that time, I spoke to the team and took their feedback, and they felt the same way as well. So immediately I put a stop to that and went with another route, which was liked by everybody else, and we were able to come out on it strongly and be able to succeed in that endeavor.
Okay. And what did you think you learned from that?
Well, I think I have to look at different angles, not just. I have become much more wiser when it comes to dealing with outside vendors now.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things, and this is very technical. But we need to be looking at streamlining the operations rather than adding a certain using a band-aid technique. I think what I was trying to do there was a band-aid technique.
Mm-hmm.
I think what was most desirable at that time was a permanent solution, which would have taken much more longer time and more money. But I think at that time that was the right decision.
Okay. So in your last position at Demantech, what was your greatest challenge there?
The biggest challenge usually for people in my position is always influencing people who are not under your direct control. They do not report to you. They have their own priorities. Mm-hmm. Even when you talk to your boss and you talk to the sponsor and you ask the person to put something on their MBOs so that they have some kind of incentive to help you do this, it's still a challenge because they may have like a 20% of their MBOs to help you, but 80% of their MBOs is to do other things. They want us to be successful in that one. And also it feels as though since I'm the leader, if we fail, it's because of me that we failed. And they did everything they could. So it's always a challenge to influence somebody, to tell someone your point of view, to get them to agree with you, to get them to walk with you in the way you want to go. That's always a challenge for someone who needs to influence someone who is cross-functional, a team of cross-functional folks, and somebody who does not report to you. That's a challenge all the time.
Okay. What next generation idea have you developed and or implemented that was particularly innovative and speculated about alternatives without all of the data?
Well, let's take the example of reporting.
Okay.
We spend so much energy, time, resources coming up with these reports. It's amazing the amount of time we spend. I looked at it and said, this can't be right. There's got to be some kind of solution out there which is more streamlined, which is more automatic. We shouldn't be spending so much of our energy and resources on every new report. We should be spending time and energy on building an infrastructure, and once we build it, the additional reports, the cost of an additional report should be minimal. We need to be building a base, which was not the case. We were spending resources and money for every extra report, and that's because we did not have the infrastructure. We had FRX reporting system, we had the BI, Pro Clarity BI, we had Crystal reports, we had what's called as the Explorer view in Apicore. We had like 6 systems, and we didn't have anyone in-house who was familiar with all of them, who was an expert in all of them. So anytime we needed something, first of all, we didn't know where to go, which one to use, and we would go somewhere else, try to get their help, and we would pay money. So I said to myself, well, let's not do this. Let's have a solution that is inclusive everything, that is one-stop solution that can give us the information we need, that can give us the reports we need, and that needs to be a SaaS solution. Everybody should be able to get this report on their desktop. And I went ahead and I negotiated, and I found a tool like that it's called Burst. And then I brought it in-house against all odds. I mean, I had to jump through hoops to get that, because that was not the mindset of the people. They were all thinking in this direction. They were not thinking in that direction. But I was able to get that in-house, and we were able to implement that. And once we were able to implement that, then it was a smooth sailing for us.
Okay, great. Tell me about a situation when there were objections to your ideas, your viewpoint, and what did you do to convince management to your point of view?
Everything that I've explained, there have always been objections. For example, the first example I said, the commissions, the management said, no, it can't be done. The tool cannot be done. It cannot. You cannot create a tool that would automatically calculate the commissions and spit them out. I said, let me try. Give me a try. Give me a chance. I will do that. The SOX. I had a different idea about how to go about it. I wanted to do it in advance so that we would have some time at the end of the operation. If something went wrong, we would have some time to fix that, as opposed to do it in the traditional way. The traditional way it's done is you wait for 1 or 2 quarters, and then you do it in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. What I tried to do in the second quarter and third quarter, so that we would have the fourth quarter available for us in case something went wrong. And that was a little bit hectic on our part, because we had to, get everybody to do it in advance as soon as we started the year. So I had some opposition for that, but I was able to convince them, the management and then the process owners, that look, if we were to take a proactive stand on this one, so that we are actually creating something as opposed to reacting to a situation, so that we anticipate what would happen. And I had to do that with the process owners, I had to do it with my management, I had to do that with the consultants who were there, I had to do that with the auditors that we were engaged in. Once I was able to convince them, and I was able to do that, end of second quarter, we had all the controls done. There were a couple of problems which we fixed in the third and the fourth quarters, and we were done. We were done 4 months in advance. So that was the hurdle that I had to pass.
If I contacted your most recent manager, what would he or she say about you?
He has actually said this on my LinkedIn, but I'll repeat it.
All right.
I will repeat it.
I'll have to look at that.
He says, I am a very analytical person. I'm a very problem-solving type of a person. I can go into a vague situation and create something concrete out of this. I have that ability to do that. And I'm a very deadline-oriented person. Show me a deadline, I get really energized and I make sure it happens. And it's not only my manager, but also the people around me have opined on LinkedIn as well. The same way. I come up with creative solutions for the problems. When I meet head on with the problems, I try to come up with other ways of dealing with it, creative ways of dealing with it, so that we can move forward.
Okay. What about gaps or areas of development?
Well, there are certain areas of development that I need, especially for this job. Risk, for example. I have not worked in a financial institution, so there are certain things that I am not as familiar as I should be. I would be if I was working in a financial institution. So those are the things I need to work on. But I'm a very fast learner, like I said before. SOX is something I had not worked on before. I worked on it for like 2 months, but still, my manager had enough confidence in me to make me in charge of implementing the entire SOX. He made me in charge of it. So I actually implemented SOX for a company when I had very little experience and actually working on it. So I was a fast learner. I was able to learn SOX and not only learn it, but direct other people to do it. And not only did I direct them, I was able to get spectacular results.
Okay. So what 2 or 3 things did you learn in your last job that you feel are critical for you in your next position?
It's always important that you take the team with you, because if you don't, then you'll be walking by yourself and there's not much you can accomplish. And the way you do that is not by an agenda, not by force. You can't achieve much by force. You need to be able to align yourself with their objectives. You have an objective. You have to understand everybody has an objective. It's not that they don't want to go with your idea. It's not that they want to harm you. It's just that their objective may be in conflict with your objective. So if you're able to figure that out, if you're able to align your objectives with their objective, then you have your work cut out for you.
Tell me how you have aligned operations with a risk strategy globally.
Risk strategy globally. Well, I have to tell you a very interesting story. This was back in Paraguay. We made antibiotics. Just to give you a 30-second introduction to antibiotics. Antibiotics are made from chemicals, and those chemicals are put in based on their potency, not based on the weightage. Even though the recipe for it calls for 10 grams of this chemical, if it's more potent, you only put 5 grams. You don't put 10 grams. So the bill of materials called for 10 grams, but because it was more potent, we paid more money and put only 5 grams. But we didn't change the bill of materials because R&D did not want to do it. So as I was observing it, I saw that strategically this was a big problem because I was seeing positive waste. Nobody has seen that before because nobody had created the report, so I created the report. I was seeing positive waste, which means if you put in $100, we're getting $105 worth of products. How is that possible? If anything, you should lose some product when you make something. It's a wastage. I was seeing positive. So I decided this was a risk to the company because there's something big happening that we are not noticing. Strategically, that was the direction I had to put my resource into. So I dug into it. To make the long story short, I found out why it was happening, and that was because of the potency. But it had huge implication to the company. For example, because of that, the inventory value was overstated. The price of the products was overstated. Because the price was overstated, we were selling to the customer at a very high price, and they wouldn't accept it, so we would lose the customer. And we would think, oh, we can't sell it to them because, hey, we're losing money. When in reality, we were not losing money. That was a huge, big deal. But finding out about this and analyzing it was nothing compared to convincing people that that was the case. Because I'm trying to simplify this. It was really complicated the way it was.
Right.
Number one, people did not want to believe me, because if they believed me, that meant that they had to change the whole thing. It was like admitting there was something big going on that was wrong. So the CFO, the president of the company, the president of the parent company who was there, all of them, none of them would believe. So I had to really face them now. The CFO came to me before the meeting and he said, "Are you sure? Do you really want to go with this?" If I had said no, and I'm not sure, nothing would have happened. My life would have continued happily. But I said, no, I'm sure. I want to go ahead with it. Now, on that day, if I was not able to convince them that I was right, I would have lost my job. Because I was taking up a lot of time from very important people, and I was making a statement that just went against their face,
Right.
just telling them, hey, there's something wrong in the company. But I was able to convince them. And it changed the strategic initiative. The CEO told me later on, he was thinking of discontinuing a majority of those items had it not been for this information. So it changed the picture on 75% of the products.
Amazing. So Vish, tell me about the most useful criticism you've ever received.
The most useful criticism I have received is try to understand it from someone else's perspective, because sometimes in my zeal to get job done, what I have done, this is a long time ago, I would see the goal, and I have an analytical mind, and I was thinking, well, that is the goal, and this is how we should do it. It is so logical. Why can't everyone understand? Let's go there. But people don't think the same way you think. Everybody is different. The way everybody thinks is unique. So you need to be able to understand from their perspective. Not everybody is analytical. People are irrational, no matter how much we think people are rational. So there is that element, the human element, that you need to understand and cope with. So that's a very useful criticism I've gotten, and then I think I've come a long way. And I don't just look at the goal and say, yes, we need to go there, and not care about how others feel.
Okay. Tell me about your communication and presentation experience, including any quarterly newsletters, internal, external meetings, presentations.
I have an excellent communication skills when it comes to presentations, for example. I speak at least once a week. I give public speeches once a week. I speak about technology, the new technology that's coming out. I'm very passionate about the change in technology, the paradigm shift that happens in people's minds when things change. I give speeches on that. I give motivational speeches. I like to change people's minds and get them to go outside their comfort zone, get them to do things that they would not have done otherwise. I like doing that, especially when it was the project implementation time. Every week I would send out information to all the stakeholders, telling them what happened. I would make it humorous or make it interesting, even though it was a dry subject. And I have given quite a few keynote speeches, and one of the keynote speeches is on the internet. I have sent that over to you in the cover letter. I would invite you to take a look at that.
Okay. What tools do you utilize to deliver data and presentations?
I use depending on the type of the audience, I use PowerPoint, or I just speak to them, depending on the type of presentation.
Okay. Anything as far as data, any other tools that you use?
Well, I use Excel, Access, Word. I have MOS, which means Microsoft Office Specialist certification, which means I'm an expert, supposedly an expert in Excel. Everybody would come to me in my previous company, especially for any Excel questions. So okay. I was known as an expert in Excel.
Okay. How would you describe your management leadership style?
The way I would describe it, and again, the best way to find out is to go to LinkedIn and look at recommendation one of my staff has done. A couple of them have done. I like to give freedom to my employees. I would like them to make decisions. I would like them to go ahead and take action on their own. But I'm always there. I'm always there to guide them, consult with them, and make sure they're going in the right direction. But I don't want to be micromanagement. I don't like micromanagement. Number one. Number two, what I like the most, because of my involvement in Toastmasters perhaps, what I love is feedback. I like honest feedback. I like to give and receive honest feedbacks, and that's one thing when I talk to my staff, that's what I tell them. That is a very important part of your growth.
Have you ever made an unpopular decision?
Yes, I have.
Tell me about one.
Several examples I gave you. Socks, for example. I made a decision to get things done earlier as opposed to later. That was an unpopular decision. When it came to commissions, I made a decision to build a tool instead of actually continuing with the process that we were doing. And antibiotics, that example I gave you, that was very unpopular. That was a risk I took.
Mm-hmm.
There are many more. Always, one thing about all the changes that I've done, if you were to look at it, is I am a self-starter when it comes to process change, because I see something and I see what it could be, what it can be, what it is, what it can be. Mm-hmm. That is something that I'm natural at. That's my talent.
Okay.
So when I see something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody else sees it the same way, which means when I take a decision, it will be an unpopular decision in the beginning. But then once I start communicating, it becomes less of a problem.
Okay. So tell me about your salary expectation.
I don't want to put a number to the expectation salary, but what I want to do is I want to look at the whole picture. I want to look at the salary and benefits, and I want to look at the entire type of growth that I am going to be getting in this position. So I think that's a complete picture that we should look at, and not just a number.
Okay, all right. And when are you available to start a position?
Within a couple of weeks, I'm ready.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me?